On today's episode of Locked On Lightning, we talk about the Lightning's 5-2 win at home, just getting off from a slow start, but they pulled it back together to win at home, 8-1-1 in their last 10, and plus adding another win to their win streak, putting them up to 5. We talk all about that and more on today's episode, but first,
you're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Denker. I would like to thank all of you for making us your first listen of the day. If you're watching us on YouTube, please go ahead and give us a thumbs up. And also, if you're listening to us on a podcast platform, please go ahead and like and subscribe to this podcast. We really, really appreciate it. So on today's episode of Locked On Lightning, we'll be discussing the 5-2 win at home against the Ottawa Senators. The Lightning got off to a slow start, but managed to pull it together to pull off an impressive win at home. All three of their stars, Brayden Point, Stamkos, and Nikita Kucherov, all get on the board in the goal-scoring column the second night in a row. So why don't we start there? Because really, I've spoken about this, and on the next episode, I think it will probably be more appropriate if they do keep all doing. If they all score once again, we have to talk about how this team is just so much better when all three of those guys score goals, or even just get on the stat sheet in general. Just how it propels this team to just another level of play. So really what stuck out to me in this game, and it ties in with these three guys scoring, is that, and we saw it early on, and this is nothing new to Lightning fans, especially if you've been watching this team for a while, is that really the Lightning are probably one of the worst starters out of any team in the National Hockey League. They are just notoriously slow, and we've seen it throughout this entire season. We've seen it over the last couple of years as well. And really, that is really the issue for them. They go through ups and downs with their play here and there, but really the one thing that has been consistent with this Lightning team is the fact that they just cannot get it together in the first 5 minutes of a game. You saw it in this one as well. No, and even not in this game, it's every game for the most part. And I understand that there in every hockey game there's a feeling out period, but the Lightning know the Ottawa Senators pretty well. This is the third time they've played all season long. They're in the same division. So really there shouldn't be that long of a feeling out period. And especially when you have your top goaltender in net, and I'm not laying any blame on Vasilevsky. He did everything he could in this game. And, if you're listening to this, if you're just jumping in right now, you'd probably think that the Lightning lost last night. And I don't want to make too much of a big deal out of this, but this is the kind of thing where we haven't seen it yet over the last couple of years. But I would have to imagine at some point, especially in the playoffs coming up, where the Lightning are going to run into a situation where they're going to be their most worst enemy. And thankfully we haven't seen that yet, but something's got to give at some point, and there's going to be some team that's going to come along at some point who's going to be able to consistently exploit that flaw in their play. And speaking of flaws in their play, the one thing that I have really been kind of concerned about over the last couple of games, and we've seen it, is the Lightning's soft play defending in front of their net. They're allowing players to create space for themselves in front of Vasilevsky. Now, obviously, Vasilevsky being one of the best goaltenders in the world, he's able to bail the Lightning out more times than not. But really, the thing that is most concerning is that the last two games, the goals that they've given up in this game and in the previous game have been right on the doorstep. And I'm sure that's something that Coach John Cooper, if he hasn't already, will address with this team. They will practice tomorrow in the morning, 10:30 skate at Amalie before they take on the Penguins at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. But I'd be curious as to what the game plan will be for the Penguins. Obviously, they're very solid down the line with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. So and those are two players that live right down there, right in front, and especially a big guy like Malkin who takes up a lot of space right in front of the creek, who in front of the crease, who's able to kind of divert Vasilevsky's sight away from the puck and be able to create very effective screens in front. I'm curious how the Lightning are going to be able to really combat that, because I'm sure that's something that the Penguins have been looking at. If they've been preparing for the Lightning, which I'm sure they have, I'm sure this is something that is on their list of things that they want to overemphasize. And we're really what the Lightning need to do is their defensemen to go out there and establish their dominance. Whether you want to give up a couple of back checks, a couple of cross checking penalties, which I'm completely fine with, because as we know, the Lightning uh, give up a lot of penalty time to the opposing team. So really, what the Lightning need to do is kind of maybe just take control of that. Say, okay, you know what? If you're going to go down there in front of our net, if you're going to try and take up space in front of our goaltender, well, guess what? You're going to get a couple of not so nice wake up calls behind you. So really, what the Lightning should do, and I'm completely fine with this. Now, if it gets a little egregious to the point where the Lightnings are consistently taking penalties for cross checking or interference or all that stuff just because of this maybe over aggressive style of play that I'm proposing that they have, okay, then maybe you cut it off. Maybe you cut it out at certain points. But really what the Lightning need to do, and we don't really hear about this or speak about this that much on the show, is that the Lightning need to go down there and establish their dominance in their own zone. They need to send a message to Pittsburgh that this is the price you'll have to pay if you want to go down there. You know, you better take your chances up at the slot or down low in the circles, but we're not going to let you go down into the low slot right there. So that's something that I really want to see the Lightning do in the next game, and that's something that we kind of saw later on in the game. And part of the reason why I bring it up is because over the last couple of games, we've seen guys going hard into the net where haven't been making contact with Vasilevsky, but there's always that risk of that happening, especially on rushes. And we saw it very much in this game that the Lightning responded well when Ottawa tried to do that. And that kind of ties in with the other point I wanted to make real quick before we head into the first break, is that oftentimes with lesser teams, I've spoken about this probably just so much to a fault to where I'm even tired of talking about it. But really what it comes down to is that the Lightning often play down to the teams that are lower than them, just talent-wise. But we didn't see that this time with Ottawa. They came prepared. They knew what kind of energy Ottawa was going to bring. And that's kind of what the lesser teams kind of run themselves into. And that's kind of probably what one could say is the first mistake that these teams make against a team like the Lightning. And in the long run, makes the Lightning play better over the course of a game is the fact that they come out there with a lot of energy. They want to play physical, and that almost forces the Lightning to take it to another level. And once you saw them kind of meet Ottawa at that level, that's when the game started to shift in favor of the Lightning. And then that's what eventually led to this 5-2 win. So we'll talk more about this game as well as the upcoming matchup against the Penguins in just a little bit. But first, I want to talk about one of today's sponsors, and that is BetOnline. Now, football might be over for the season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, and also, if you were following us then, the Olympic coverage. So definitely look that up. Keep that in mind for future Olympics as well as international events. Now, head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So if you're following us on YouTube, we're just going to keep the ball rolling. If you're listening to us on a platform, welcome back from the break. But yeah, going back to my point about this game, and that's kind of the thing that we haven't seen too often about with the Lightning, is that when they play a team who wants to set the tone early energy wise, we've kind of seen them, I wouldn't say shrink back but to the point to where they kind of need to catch their breath. And we usually see them respond in the second period, where the Lightning did a very good job of keeping their composure together. And a lot of that has to do with the play of Ross Colton, Corey Perry, and Patrick Maroon and Anthony Cirelli, who have all been having fantastic years. And that really speaks to the versatility of this Lightning team and has really been the reasoning for their long-term success over the last couple of years, as well as their success this year, where they are very much in the conversation for not only taking the division at the end of the year, but possibly being in the conversation for the President's Trophy. Now, we'll have to wait and see what Colorado does, because Colorado's having a fantastic season as well. But I don't really think that's something that the Lightning are particularly worried about right at this point in time. I'm sure if it comes down to the last week or so and they're within a couple of points of the Avalanche, maybe John Cooper will let the horses out of the barn, and we'll see maybe them take their play to a whole nother level, which they already have, which is scary to even think about, considering the amount of injuries and obstacles that this team has already had to face, and they still have so many more games ahead of them. So it's very, and I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. So if you want to go back and to listen to this episode, I posed the question, with everything that's been going on with COVID, with injuries, with guys in and out of the lineup for numerous reasons, and the Lightning where they are in the standings at this point in the season, have we seen them at their full potential? And we've seen spurts here and there. I think in this game, we definitely saw the Lightning for the team that they really are, and they're an experienced team, and their ability to stay composed throughout the ebbs and flows of a hockey game is really something that you can't teach. That just goes with time and experience, and really it's so valuable to see this team be able to handle that, especially the younger players on this team, the Cal Foots, the Andre Schusters, the Ross Coltons, the Matthew Josephs, all the other young players on this team, even Brayden Point. The amount of young players who go out there with the composure of a 17-year veteran, I mean, it really speaks volumes, not only about the development of this team, but it really speaks about, what John Cooper has been able to accomplish over the last couple of years. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Lightning are so versatile, and Coach Cooper is able to sub guys in and out of the lineup at a moment's notice, and be able to switch up the lines during the course of a game if need be. So, and combine all of that with deep runs in the playoffs. I mean, they were talking about it on the broadcast the other night, and I firmly believe, I've been hesitant a little bit all year, but I've been starting to kind of warm up to the idea, and I think I'm going to finally say it in full confidence on this show, is that the Lightning's chances of three-peating, they could do it. I think they're the best team thus far that we have seen over the past 20 years that is most equipped to three-peat. And I'm not just saying that of recency bias because of where they are right now in the season, but for the reasons that I have just listed off over the last 10 minutes, that this team is just, if you look top to bottom, I don't really see a hole. Now, the question is going to be, where do you fit Zach Bogosian in once he comes back? Now, that might take away some playing time from Cal Foote, which is really unfortunate to see, but and could pose a problem for Cal as the season goes on and potentially as we run into the playoffs. But it's a good problem to have. And it goes, and everything that I've just said really ties in with how the course of that game last night against Ottawa went. And you saw a team who was down early 2-0, dug themselves a hole, and then guys started going out there and took the game by the reins, and just eased into scoring. And guys like Nikita Kucherov, Brayden Point, Steven Stamkos, those guys, and I've stated it before, I stated at the top of the show, is that when those guys are on the ice with each other, they're the most lethal trio that I have seen ever. I don't think you could name a trio out there in the NHL that is even remotely as dangerous as these guys. And we're very lucky, and I think it's almost, you got to say that this team is almost unbeatable when those three guys are on the ice together, and when they all score, and they all score goals. Because really, if you get those three guys on the ice, not only are you getting 3 points out, 3 goals out there if they all score, but I think those 3 goals really inject a lot of confidence in this team. And I think it's a level of confidence that we have not been able to see out of this team consistently in a very long time, probably since they tied the record for most wins in a season back in 2019, when, as we all know, they went on to unfortunately get bounced in the first round against Columbus. But yeah, I think that really what it comes down to is that this team is the best version of this team that we have seen all year. I still think there's a lot to improve. Most notably, they got to do a better job in front of their presence in front of the net, not allow things to get crowded in front of Vasilevsky, allow Vasilevsky to get into the groove of things, and you got to play a full 60 minutes. We haven't really seen a lot of games this year in which the Lightning have played a full 60 minutes. So those are the two things that they need to improve upon. But you know what? You can't fault them for how they've played recently, considering that the results are there. They've been munching points. How they've responded in moments of adversity. It's really something to admire. And they did a very good job last night. And I said it in the preview episode when it comes down to it. Regardless of what you think they are in terms of their win-loss and points, Senators are a good team. And, the Lightning had to be prepared for what was coming, and they were. And that really comes down to veteran leadership. And we saw it right there on the stat sheet. You could look top to bottom, and the leadership was there. So, this is probably the most satisfied, most happiest I've been with a Lightning win all season long. I really hope to see this level of play carried over in tomorrow night's game against Pittsburgh. That's going to be a very interesting matchup. I spoke about it earlier on in the year when these two teams faced on opening night. If there was ever a team out there, now I probably didn't say these exact words, but really what my point was that if there was ever a team out there in the NHL that is, in terms of at least veteran leadership. Now, one can make the argument, you could go position by position, that obviously the Lightning are on top in terms of, just level of talent. But what it comes down to is that if there was ever a team that is closest identically in terms of how they go out there, how they handle things on the ice, it's the Pittsburgh Penguins. And a lot of that has to do with their recent success as well, where they were the last team that had a chance to three-peat. So, there's a lot of parallels to be drawn between these two teams. So thus far on the season, the Lightning are 1-2 against Pittsburgh. Last matchup was actually 0-2, excuse me. Unfortunately, the Lightning have not fared well against the Pittsburgh Penguins thus far this season. Actually 1-1. I'm all over the place with this today, people. But so they split it thus far. Their last meeting was in October, a 5-1 win on the road in Pittsburgh. As we all know, opening night was unfortunate result for the Lightning, losing 6-2 at Amalie as they raised the banner that night. But you know what? Every team has to start somewhere. But yeah, I would love to see how these two teams pair up against each other tomorrow night. We're going to talk some stats about how these two teams on paper at least stack up against each other. But two teams are coming into it. They're both playing very good hockey. The Penguins come in with a record of 6-3-1 in their last two. So we'll talk all about that right after the break. But first, I want to talk about our last sponsor of the day, and that is Rock Auto. Now, everybody, with winter starting to wrap up, and you want to maybe make some new additions and changes to your car, let me tell you, Rock Auto is your place if you want to go for parts that you're still scrounging for, or parts where you want to kind of pimp your ride a little bit, kind of reference the show on MTV. But you want to save money. You don't want to break the bank doing it because you want to have some money left over to go out for the summer. Well, Rock Auto is your place. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, or even 100% more for the same parts with a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto, and most importantly, this is the one thing that really matters to me most, is Rock Auto is a family business serving the do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. So they bring those family values. They know, not everyone is going to be able to go out there and spend thousands, $2,000, $3,000 on brake parts. Well, guess what? They have those values. They understand, and they're going to bring that in, and they bring that into their business model. They have everything you can need as well: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpeting. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box so they know we sent you? Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. And so we're picking it back up. Once again, if you're following along on YouTube, we're just jumping right back into it. If you're listening to us on the podcast platforms, you're joining us after the break. And if you're following us, don't forget to like and subscribe. Give us a rating, please. We really appreciate it. You guys have been doing a fantastic job with that. It's really paying dividends. We're getting more new listeners every day, and we really appreciate the enthusiasm you guys bring on a daily basis. So go ahead and like and subscribe to us. If you want to give us a follow on our social media outlets, go ahead, LO_lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_lightning on Instagram. Give me a follow. If you want to tweet to me, ask me some questions about the Lightning, ask me some questions about the upcoming trade deadline. That's going to be interesting because General Manager Julian Brees-Boss came out the other day and essentially said that we don't really have any moves to make. And I will talk about that a little bit more. The trade deadline isn't till the 21st of March. So we still have a couple of weeks before, we could really get into the nitty gritty of that. I'm very interested to see what the Lightning do because, it's one thing to say we don't need to fill any holes, but then we could be talking in a couple of weeks, God forbid, that, a big time, one of our big time players could go down. It's happened. We could lose somebody for the rest of the year, lose somebody for the entire playoffs. So I wouldn't be surprised, if given the opportunity, especially if they have to put a big contract on LIR, that they go out there and they make a big deal. I don't know how it's going to happen. I think that the Lightning are at a point right now, if barring some major catastrophic injury where you lose one of our top players for the remainder of the season, I think the Lightning are fine. I don't see a weakness anywhere, especially with, you have Zach Bogosian coming back from injury, who's been out of the lineup for a very long time. And even if you don't want to rush him back in, I think Cal Foote and Mikhail Sergachev on that last line, they're doing a fantastic job. And then you have Chernak and McDonough and Ruda and Hedman. I think the back end is pretty solid, and even the forwards. I think the bottom three, or actually the bottom six. Excuse me, the bottom six is pretty solid. I don't see any weaknesses anywhere, and I don't see these guys slowing down at any point in time. So, speaking of not slowing down at any point in time, as we know, the Lightning come into tomorrow night's game against the Pittsburgh Penguins with a 5-game win streak. Now, this is not going to come down to talent, believe it or not, as maybe most sporting events might. It does come down to talent, but this, I think, whenever you play against a team like the Pittsburgh Penguins, you got to make an exception, and for the reasons that I stated before, because of the recent success that this team has had, and just how similar they are on the ice. Not so much on paper, because I think there's a lot of areas where the Lightning are head and shoulders better than the Pittsburgh Penguins. But what we've seen from this Penguins team all season long, if you've been following them, if you've been able to catch them on a game, is just their level of composure. If you look at any team in the NHL other than Tampa, really, the Pittsburgh Penguins are the model of been there, done that. And that it starts from the top with that team and Sidney Crosby. And he is the kind of player who, he scares me. It doesn't matter if he's in the middle of a scoring rut. It doesn't matter if he's just coming off IR or he's playing dinged up. He is the kind of guy. And I don't throw around, I don't say this a lot about a lot of players. There's only probably a handful of players that I look at in the National Hockey League that have the ability, such as Sidney Crosby, such as Nikita Kucherov, such as Connor McDavid, who have the ability to take a game, put the team on their shoulders, and completely change the whole flow of the game, and to be able to have a real impact on the game. And that's the thing I'm going to be interested to see, especially with the recent struggles in the last couple of games that the Lightning have had about allowing players to fight easily almost for position in front of Vasilevsky. Is how are they going to be able to put and keep Sidney Crosby in check? A guy who is just so good at redirecting pucks, who's so good at going into the slot, drawing attention to himself, and then dishing it out to the winger on coming down the other lane. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Lightning, where they direct their attention. Are they going to have the kind of mentality? Well, he's just one guy. Let's have him try and beat us, and we'll focus on everybody else. Or do you bottleneck the slot and allow a little bit more room along the boards, especially when you have a guy like Nikita Kucherov on the ice who is just so good. And I feel like I've almost done him a disjustice by not talking enough about his ability of just being able to control the flow of the game along the boards with the puck, whether it's in his own zone or in the attacking zone. And I think, as much as he's a huge factor, it doesn't come down to one guy. I think really the defensive cores, who no matter who's on the ice, if Hedman's on the ice and Crosby's down low, Hedman should easily outpower him down low, and just give him a little wax in the leg. Kind of, hey, I'm here. Don't get too comfortable. As for that rest of that team, and even this Penguins team in general, other than Malkin, other than Rust, other than Crosby, I look at this team and I'm not too worried. Now, Tristan Jarry, he's an interesting case. 26, 11, and 6, with a goals against average of 2.33 and a save percentage of 9.21 with 4 shutouts. Those are nice numbers. Those are very good numbers. But you know what? If you've been listening to the show for a while, I always have the mindset, if you think your goaltender is good, go against our goaltender. And I think, especially in a game like this where there's a lot of experience flying around the ice, I think it will always come down to goaltending, unless we see something absolutely wacky in this game. Unless we see maybe the Penguins decide to start DeSmith instead of Jarry. I think this is a game where it's going to be one down the middle, and on both sides. If you could control the middle of the ice, you could control the neutral zone. This is going to be a game that's going to be decided by those factors. If the Lightning could control the middle in their own zone, not allow the Penguins to penetrate deep into that slot area, then I think they could live and die. I think they could live with Crosby getting a couple of points, especially if you have Kucherov, Stamkos, and Point going out there and doing what we know that they are fully capable of doing and what they have been doing over the last couple of games. So let us know, of course, on our social media platforms what you think. If you want to throw out some predictions, like I said, if you want to give us a couple of questions to ask on the show, we'd love to hear from you all. And we'll be back on tomorrow's episode recapping the game once it ends. So once again, go ahead and like and subscribe to the podcast and turn on those notifications so you'll be notified as soon as the newest episode drops. So that's been it for today's episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Denker. I'll talk to you in the next one.